Hi gang, Rob here. It is the evening of 26 May 2013, the day before Memorial Day. So tomorrow we will commemorate, we will remember, we will pay homage to the fallen veterans who have defended our great nation. May our prayers be with their families, and may our hearts give thanks to their efforts and their sacrifices. A good day, I think, for a knife review. We're going to review one of the two blades on this table today. It's not going to be this one, the outstanding Hall of Fame EDC Paramilitary 2 by Spyderco. It is going to be this one, the time-tested, very famous and quite excellent Benchmade 940. The example available for our review tonight is property of Campfire Talk, my YouTube buddy and Christian brother. He recently did a huge favor for me. Made me a sheath for a knife that is near and dear to my heart, and in return, and just because I like him, I told him I would sharpen his new acquisition, sort of a grail knife for camp, his 940, and I thought while I had it in my possession I would carry it a little bit, use it a little bit, and give you all a review. So here goes. This knife has been around a long time by knife standards. I think 14 or 15 years. Benchmade produced, and product of the design mind of Warren Osborne. You can see the Osborne logo here. Let's talk about what makes this knife up. Well, it's constructed of aluminum scales, aluminum handles, I guess I would say, hard anodized in a beautiful dark green, with a purple anodized titanium backspacer. None of this will be new to most of you. In the most current iteration, it uses a blade made of CPM S30V stainless steel. The blade is 3.4 inches in length, 115 thousandths thick. The handle is 4.47 inches long. So that gives us an overall length of 7.87 inches. The knife is extremely light. And if you guys have seen videos on this knife, and there are many, but never held one in your hand, I can tell you this. You can hear the weight in a video, but you can't really connect it in your mind how light this knife really is until you hold it in hand. It weighs 2.9 ounces. A 3.4 inch blade, all metal construction, and 2.9 ounces. The knife is literally a feather. It disappears in your pocket. It's perfectly balanced. Super thin in pocket. Not only thin in width, but thin in breadth. You know, you look at this knife folded, it literally disappears in your pocket. Now, many a knife channel on YouTube has talked about this knife to death. There are guys who love it, who extol its praises, and there are guys who think it's overpriced and light duty for the money that you pay for it. Wow. I understand both of those perspectives. I really do. I guess here's why. Let's bring in the competition. This knife has a street price that, eBay or internet retailer of somewhere between $140 and $160, depending on the source and the timing. So let's call it a $150 knife in reality. The Paramilitary 2, in its base configuration, with your choice of black or the digital camo handle and the S30V blade, can be had for about between $100 and $120. Availability of this knife hasn't been great lately. I suppose prices have been closer to $120 than $100. It weighs almost an ounce more than the 940 at 3.75 ounces. Blade on this knife is 5/32 thick, so a little over 150 thousandths. So clearly a thicker blade stock than the 940. However, when we get down here to the tips, let me line them up here. The 940 has a more robust tip because of this very interesting and super functional blade design. They call it a modified reverse tanto. Could you make the case that the materials used in the Paramilitary 2 are of lesser cost than the 940? I suppose you could. The G10 might be less expensive to use for a knife than this beautifully sculpted aluminum. No titanium backspacer in this knife. But in many, many ways, these knives are extremely similar. Blades are almost exactly the same length. Let me line them up here for you. Trust me, they're lined up, and there you see that. However, I'm going to line up the cutting edges for you. And let's take another look. Benchmade on the left, guys. Because of the 50-50 choil in the Paramilitary 2, the 940 has much more cutting edge. Doesn't have the belly that the Paramilitary has, but if you look closely, because of the shape of the knife, the way the handle and blade relationship is, the cutting edge goes almost back to the end of the handle, which gives you a lot of usable knife in a very small, very lightweight package. And speaking of small package, let's close both knives and look at overall length of the handle closed. Paramilitary 2 has a lot of, well, either wasted handle or, well, you can term that however you want. It makes it very ergonomic, but the blade to handle ratio is a little off compared to the 940. So as far as an extremely carryable package that maximizes the blade that comes out of it, the 940 clearly wins. Is it worth $30 or $40 more than a Paramilitary 2? Wow, that's pretty subjective. You can make the case that it is a bit overpriced. I do not think you can make the case that the knife is weak. In fact, let's look at the sum of its parts. It uses Benchmade's Axis lock. If you want to know how that stacks up for strength, reference my knife lock mechanisms video. It's among the best. Here's a sub 3-ounce knife. I'm going to grab a hold of it with a tight grip, and I'm going to grab the blade clear out at the end. And I'm putting some pretty heavy torque on that knife, guys. There's nothing there. No movement whatsoever. Up and down play. Yeah, good luck ever finding that in an Axis lock knife. There just is none. This knife, the strength properties and cutting ability truly belie its size and weight. It is sort of a magical, classic, enduring design. And you know, there's a reason Benchmade still makes this knife after all these years, because it's that good. You know, if you're a knife guy and you've always wanted one of these, as I have, you're not going to be disappointed. This knife belongs to Campfire Talk, and that was this knife for him. It was a knife that he had watched on YouTube and seen in the hands of others for years and years and years, and he wanted one, and when he had money in the budget to buy one, he got it. That's a great thing. And he's not disappointed. You won't be either. Is it the greatest EDC knife of all time? Well, gosh. It's close. You guys already have seen my video, I'm sure, on this knife. You know how I feel about it. Can I say it's better than the 940? Nope. Can I say it's better than the 940 price considered? Maybe. But this old girl here hasn't exactly been kicked off her throne. By the way, you see how smoothly this knife operates? Like most well-executed Axis lock Benchmades, it's almost perfect. Might use a disassembly and a fluff and buff and a lube. It might then get to the status of my para. It's not quite there. Not quite a free swinger, but close. I want to talk a little bit about the edge. It's been a topic of lots of discussion on this knife, on this model, I should say. For a long time, Benchmade was grinding the cutting edge at a very, very steep angle. This knife is a current production blade, I believe. Now, it didn't come sharp. Camp sent it to me after carrying it for about a month and a half, and the factory edge was unmolested. It just wasn't very sharp. And I'll show you some before and after cut tests here to illustrate what I'm talking about. And then we'll come back and have a discussion about this edge. So here is Campfire Talk's Benchmade 940 as received at the sharpening bench after approximately a month and a half of everyday carry with a factory edge. Let's see how sharp it is. And I haven't touched this with the strop or anything. This is not real pretty, boys. Let's see. That's not good. Well, that's where we start. Well, here is the Campfire Talk Benchmade 940 post sharpening. How does it look? Well, it looks beautiful. Let's see if it cuts. I love phone book paper. That rocks. Well, Camp, I'm going to put this in a box and send it back to you in a few weeks. Okay, so you can see obviously that some improvement was made after an hour, hour and a half with the Edge Pro and a strap. Now, what did we have to do? Now, strikingly, when I looked at this knife, I thought I was going to do a big reprofile on the approach grind, or on the secondary bevel, or the shiny part that you see. It looked to me like it was probably grounded 18 or 20 degrees. That was not the case. Even though this knife isn't very broad from spine to cutting edge, it is only made of 115 thousandths stock, and it's very, very thin behind the edge. This thing was ground almost exactly at 15 degrees per side, or 30 degrees inclusive. Now, it wasn't very symmetrical, especially at the tip. And the micro bevel, if there was one, it wasn't very good. And it wasn't sharp. You can see by the paper cut test that it wasn't sharp. But what I ended up with doesn't look, as far as dimensions go, much different than the factory edge. It sure is a lot more refined and a lot sharper. But what I'm finding is that the rumors of overly steep grinds on the 940 either, well, they're not true anymore, let's put it that way. You just don't have a lot of run, even at the rather steep angle of 15 degrees per side of secondary bevel, because the blade is so thin behind the edge, which makes it a much better slicer than previously reported. A lot of guys say this knife isn't a cutter. Well, I beg to differ. It is a cutter, and a pretty good cutter. Now, I did have some irregularities to overcome in the factory grind, but I didn't have to remove a lot of material. One area that did present a problem, and I've looked at lots of examples of this knife in pictures and on video. I'm going to use the para to point. The area that we're talking about is right here. If you notice, I'll try to make the light hit this so you can see it. The plunge grind is still in radius as the cutting edge starts. And even the factory grind, the cutting edge grind, was back into this radius. Now this one doesn't look like the end of the cutting edge backs into the radius too far, and that's because I removed some of it. You can't really call it a sharpening choil because it's not. But this area of relieved material right back here needs to be bigger. I made it a little bigger just for ease of sharpening over time, so I didn't end up with a large recurve point on the back of the cutting edge, and so I didn't have a lot of difficulty sharpening this area of the blade. It came out really, really well, but if you want the knife to sharpen well, because the cutting edge is so straight, you're going to need to take care of that issue. There are many ways to skin that cat. You just need to bring that little radius forward, get rid of that unsharpened point that flares out. You'll be fine. Do I wish that wasn't there? Yeah, I do, but try to find a production knife that doesn't have that. Trust me, guys, they all have that, with very rare exception. Most people don't notice or talk about it, but I do, because I sharpen knives, and it creates problems. Okay, let's talk about one other area that bothers me about this knife, and it's this pocket clip. It's the same clip that's been on the 940 from day one, except one thing. Back in the day, this well-designed, very Emerson-like pocket clip that's on most Benchmades, it used to be Parkerized. It was sort of a powdery black finish. It wore well. As the knife got old, it sort of got thin around the corners, and you ended up with these uniformly worn, shiny spots. And then at some point they decided, you know, maybe that Parkerization is too expensive. Maybe we could save a little money in unit cost, and we could throw some Krylon on our pocket clips. Well, I don't know if it's Krylon, but it's black paint that doesn't stick. This knife is less than 2 months old. It's carried by somebody who really cares for it well, and it's already starting to chip. And if you've seen very many pictures of old 940s, you know that the chipping will continue, and this very handsome, well-crafted knife with a lot of attention to detail will be sporting a shabby, cheap-looking, used-to-be black pocket clip. I don't like it. Another thing is that, let's get it in scale here, the clip's too big for the knife. I mean, it takes up half the handle. There are some limited edition or gold class 940s that use Benchmade's Parkerized split arrow pocket clip. They look great. It's not my favorite clip on most of their knives. It's kind of light, but this is a very light knife. That clip is kind of slim. This is a very slim knife. It has a point on the end, that clip does. Well, so does the body of this knife. It looks great on this knife. They just need to use it on all 940s. And then they'd have perfection. Yet many minutes of videos have been spent talking about how this quote-unquote jimping on the spine isn't very effective. Well, it's not. But you know what? The knife doesn't need it. The anodized handle, just by texture, is very grippy. There's a functional finger choil, and this is not really a knife you're going to do a lot of stabbing with. Could you? I think you could. Either in a conventional saber grip because of the flare of the handle, or you can back up on it, turn it sideways, bury the handle in the fat of your hand, and you're going to thrust just fine without slipping forward. You know, it's pretty rare, guys, that I find a knife that I can only talk about 2 negatives. You know, my clip issue with this knife, I'm picky. The back of the cutting edge, where it meets the plunge grind, very few knives get that right. Am I gonna not buy the 940 because of those 2 things? Absolutely not. I'll make the change in the cutting edge I need to make, and I'll order a split arrow Parkerized clip from Benchmade. And then I'll have the perfect Benchmade EDC knife. If you've always wanted this knife and you have the money for it, go get it. It's right there at the top. Can I tell you which one's better? No. You should have both. That's it for tonight, guys. Grace and peace. And remember, the word is sharp.